This podcast includes graphic depictions of true crime cases and may contain explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Hey, this is Robin.
This is Jackie.
And this is Amanda.
And you are listening to We Saw the Devil, a podcast dedicated to horror, true crime, and all things macabre. If you want to follow us between shows, don't forget to check us out online. You can go to our website at www.wesawthedevil.com. You can follow us on Instagram at We Saw the Devil Podcast or on Twitter at We Saw the Devil. And if you want to follow specific co-hosts' social media, you can find the links to those on our website as well. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of We Saw the Devil. Tonight we will be airing part 2 of our Expressions of Mormonism, Dissecting the Beliefs of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell series, where Ian Murphy, writer, broadcaster, and member of the LDS Church, joins us to discuss how LDS doctrine and theology meshes with what we know about Chad and Lori Daybell, the document from Ian Pawlowski, and the 7 missions we discussed last week. So tonight we will be discussing homosexuality, what we think happened, patriarchy in the Mormon Church, and just generic questions that some listeners had relating to the case and how it deals with Mormonism. Before we get into that, 2 quick updates. Number 1, don't forget that our East Area Rapist / Original Night Stalker series will begin later this week. This will be a multi-part series where we delve into the case as a whole, and you will not want to miss it. We are going to deep dive through the entire thing, crime by crime, and each moniker that is attributed to him. So that will be dropping later this week and will be ongoing. And then also don't forget, I know times are tough. I know that it sucks being stuck at home, quarantined. Well, if you're unlike me, I'm loving this. But Patreon. Thank you to our Patreons. We have Derek, Amy, Nikki, Shawna, Iris, Gwen, and Ian. Thank you so much. Super appreciate your support. We could not do this without you. We want to make the best show that we can possibly make. And if you have as little as $3, you like the show and you want to support us, please consider being a patron. We have t-shirts, stickers, merch stuff. We have private community chats. You can vote on new show topics. Or if you just have a business or store that you want to throw out there and promote, we do have over 13,000 followers across various mediums. So, for as little as $3, even a shout out on our social media. So thank you so much again for listening. We will go ahead and air part 2 of our conversation with Ian. If you listen to part 1, you will notice that our sound quality is a little different and a little less for this series. We did have to make some changes in order to do this interview. So please bear with us, and we will see you later this week with Joseph James D'Angelo as the East Area Rapist. So I am happy to say that we must not have scared Ian off, because he is joining us for part 2 this evening. So Ian, welcome back.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me back.
We didn't even get through half of our questions last week. So thanks for taking the time to, come back and flesh the rest of this out with us. Everything that you told us last week was so fascinating to the case and added another layer and really kind of gave us a different perspective. So yeah, we were really sad at the end of our evening last week when we had just still like a list of questions for you that we weren't able to cover.
Agreed.
I'll try to be a little more concise this week.
Oh no.
I think you did great last week.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've gotten a lot of really great feedback too. Everyone is super interested and excited for part 2. So before we get into that, Ian, do you want to just really quickly give everyone a brief, autobiography?
Yeah, I joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints when I was in my early 20s. This was back in 1995, which seems forever ago. I've been an active member of the church ever since then and served in a wide variety of leadership positions with local congregations. My current calling, which is the term we use for those responsibilities within a local congregation or ward, is as the ward mission leader, which means I'm responsible for coordinating the work of full-time missionaries and the members of the ward. I'm not a conventional Mormon by any means. I'm from the liberal wing of the church, so to speak. We tend to think of faith groups as being these sort of monolithic groups where everybody believes exactly the same and to the T, and that's never the case, inevitably. I know that some of my opinions and beliefs are a minority position within the church, but you can find people like me in probably every single local congregation. Now, that said, I have an interesting perspective that I bring to things because I married someone who's from what we call pioneer stock. Her family goes back many generations in the church. She's helped me understand a lot more of church history and some of the more detailed pieces of doctrine and things. So I have that position of being an outsider in a way as a convert. Mm-hmm. I joined the church in England and I moved to the US 10 years ago. My wife is American. So I have that immigrant experience as well. And we don't quite fit in the conventional Mormon box in other ways as well. I have a complex sexuality that I'm open about, and we don't have children. You have that stereotypical image of Mormons having these sort of big, happy families with an army of children that could be a dance troupe all on their own. We don't really have that aspect to it. So it positions us both in the heart of the church, but slightly on the outside looking in as well. And I think that that's some of the reasons why, I have a slightly different perspective on things and a different take on things and ask different questions.
And that's really what we appreciate about your perspective and what you can offer and bring to the show. Now, so speaking of weekly updates, there are a few updates this week that we have. One being the body cam footage from the police. Amanda, do you want to talk about that a little for a moment?
Yeah, I've seen it a couple different places. The first place I saw it was, of course, Justin Lum. And it's body cam footage released from January 31st of 2019. And it's Lori and Tylee basically at a desk with a police officer discussing Charles and a couple things that had been going on.
And Ian, I believe you watched this footage as well, correct?
Yes. This was, really interesting just to see the body language and the type of communication. From a viewer perspective, it's a shame that everybody is a little blurred out, and I understand that that's the law enforcement policy for this footage. And from a privacy perspective, I can understand that. Just from a viewer, you're kind of like, oh, I wish I could see a little more. I wish I could understand a little better.
Right.
But it is fascinating to see how casual Lori is about all of this. And this is a repeat refrain throughout the case, just how nonchalant she seems about every step of this, and also how often it is that we see Tylee kind of stepping in to kind of tell her mom to calm down a little or step.
Yeah. And she's very much, she almost seems like the mother at certain points where she's like, hang on, or she said something where I was like, oh, she's more adult than Lori is.
Lori couldn't even feign upset.
No.
That's what was mind-blowing to me. I mean, her demeanor from the time that she pulled up to her home, right, when Alex was already sitting on the curb and the police officer was just so nonchalant, and they were just, showing up and acting like they were best friends with Alex. When Lori shows up, I mean, she really maintains that demeanor the entire time.
Yeah, I think that's just her. Like, I mean, now it's two videos. They are interactions with police, so maybe that's just like, it could go either way. Either she's aloof and doesn't care about anything, or she just gets so overly nervous with a police officer that maybe she acts, giggly and just kind of out there. Because I do know that that's the thing with, any type of enforcement, whether it be like police, firefighters, or even like doctors. Some people kind of get that weird, nervous laugh and nervous whatever. It could be that, just to play, both sides there. But also, it just comes across as she's kind of in her own world.
Yeah. I'd throw two other possible perspectives in there. One is it a kind of protective shell? But, somebody who's afraid of showing that they're overwhelmed or having kind of a breakdown that they don't want to have in front of other people. Sometimes you do laugh a little defensively. Sometimes you do have that protectiveness. The other thing that I think is more likely is if she has got a pack of lies in her head that she's got to remember to tell, that's where her focus is. And there has to be a kind of front to go with that.
Yes.
Because she can't be thinking, how do I express my grief? How do I put these feelings out there? She has to be thinking, what do I need to say? What have I got to say next? Honest people don't have to spend a lot of time typically thinking ahead. How do I say this next? What do I have to remember to say? You can just relax and say what you need to say. But somebody who knows that they've got lies to tell, it must be a different kind of stress in that situation, and your mind's thinking about different things. And that's where my mind went to watching this, that she is busily thinking about, how do I explain this? What do I need to say? How do I make sure I tell the right lie? That she's not acting in what we'd perceive to be the appropriate manner. And this is part of what's interesting about Charles's shooting and death, that Alex and Laurie tell such different accounts of what happened. And it is not possible for both of them to be telling the truth of what happened that day.
And
exactly.
That's what's so flabbergasting to me, is the fact that, you know, we've discussed at length the scenario and situation regarding Charles's shooting, how the police showed up and they did no investigation whatsoever. It's like they showed up, Alex came out of the home, they were like, what happened? Alex told them, and then the police literally took that at face value. They did not check for gun residue. They did not swab blood. There was blood, don't forget, on the kitchen faucet and the sink, and they did not take it or test it. I mean, they did absolutely nothing. They took Alex's word as, for lack of a better phrasing, the gospel, and that is exactly what they went with.
Right. Well, one thing, though, that is just one body cam. And then there is one that goes inside, too. But again, be careful if you look that up, because you do see his body for a moment, the one that was released. And then you don't know what some of the other ones were doing either. They haven't been released yet. So I don't know if maybe that's something they're holding on to for, you know, the actual trial, or if there is one that'll come up, or maybe just because they said that they are investigating Laurie as a possible suspect now.
That's weird too. Do you have
Maybe.
Do either of you have speculation on that? I believe that this ties into the FBI announcement maybe a month ago, saying that the digital evidence that they had gathered had kind of shown them a web of I forgot their exact phrasing, forgive me, a web of like sinister intent and crime. So I wonder if maybe, you know, between Chad's email, the 7 missions to accomplish together, the one where he was planning, where Laurie emailed Chad as Charles to get him to come down, you know, the week before his shooting.
Right.
If somehow they have unearthed evidence to show that this was in some ways planned.
I feel like they do. I mean, last week we discussed that email from the police department that says that they're confident that they're getting closer to getting Laurie indicted for her involvement in Charles's death. So I mean, there has to be something there. Now, with the body cam that was just released this week, though, the one of, again, it's Laurie, it's Tylee, Melanie Gibb is in the room as well. What do you guys think about the relationship between Tylee and Laurie?
Ian, I will let you tackle this one first.
We talked a little bit before about the way Tylee seems to be more of the adult in this, but the failings of law enforcement in this specific case, Charles's death, really are shocking. And mentioning Tylee is critical to this, because Laurie's version of events includes Tylee being inside, and she said that Charles was going for Tylee. So where is Tylee's account of what happened?
What do you guys think of her demeanor sitting there? I mean, I know that in the last episode with you, Ian, we did discuss how people handle trauma differently. And I can't imagine how much trauma, I mean, not only being Laurie's daughter, okay, considering her beliefs and whatnot, but just everything that Tylee had been through even up to that point. You know, we saw how they had been living, you know, her room and the mattress and on the floor and everything. But what do you guys think of her demeanor sitting there with Laurie?
just seems so responsible.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we've heard a lot of how close she was with JJ and how much JJ loved her. And I suspect that she was forced to take on a mother role with JJ.
Yes.
And forced to be quite responsible and, you know, be the responsible adult for him a lot of the time. And I think that's the type of personality that we see play out here in that footage of someone who's used to being responsible beyond what is normal for her age.
There's also where he mentioned the bond between her and JJ. There's videos too. I don't know if you guys have looked at her Facebook, or I know one of her friend's moms is in one of the groups. And I know it's been a while, but she mentioned, or I think shared some like little Snapchat, it looks like, videos of Tylee and her friend. And there's one where, you know, she's joking around with her friend. Her friend's doing a video and taking a video of JJ, and then Tylee runs up in the video and grabs JJ and holds onto him and says, "You're taking a video of my child," but jokingly. But yeah, she very much took on that mother role.
Yeah, no, she absolutely did.
Okay, and in this video too, they tell Lori that there's a petition for her mental health evaluation that's being verified. Now in this video too, there is, even Justin quoted it, but when I was watching the video the first time, it stuck out to me. The officer says, "Just talking to you, I mean, I don't see you being a danger to anyone else or yourself. You got your kids to school." Okay. I mean, in the video, I will be honest though, she doesn't come across as a danger in this video, at least. I don't know what Charles had said in order to get the petition, you know, in process at all. But I mean, she appears fairly normal. Yes. What do you guys think?
I think it's a bizarre thing to say. I mean, Ted Bundy did not come across to people as being a danger to anyone.
Right? I mean, yes.
Jeffrey Dahmer was the unassuming chocolate factory worker too, so
that's true. Officer Thomas Egerton, that's his quote. And oh my gosh, could you imagine being that poor guy right now?
No.
So if you want to look at the video, it is, I know Justin Lum, Fox 10 Phoenix, had posted it a couple times, it looks like, and then the news did a short story on it. At the end, too, did you guys notice how they name-dropped Jason, too?
Yes.
That stuck out to me.
I wonder how much Jason Moe, I believe his name is going to come into the picture into this.
I think he's coming because, I mean, they brought it up like, oh, and we know a police officer. I don't know if he was a police officer at the time or if he had already stopped, but that's something we can look into.
All right, so what's next on the list? Venmo accounts.
Yeah, Annie Cushing posted on the Christmas Misery group earlier. I want to say it was earlier. About Tylee's transaction from Venmo, the October 16th transaction, disappeared from her feed. Again, going backwards a little, they said that Tylee and or Lori would send money to Colby and his family through Venmo, right? And it was public. I mean, people have been commenting on there too, so I don't know where it went or who took it away. I was playing with mine, trying to figure out, like, can you delete something or make it private? And the only thing I can think of is you can make it private. So you can make certain transactions private or whatever you're doing private. So I don't know if they did that. It was just that one transaction that I can see. And I don't know who made it private.
Yeah, that's bizarre that someone, since Lori has been put into jail, edited the Venmo account. I assume law enforcement, but that is interesting.
I don't think law enforcement would have done it, but I think people involved can make it private for whatever reason, that particular October 16th transaction. Now, something that did come of this, though, is a while back when we were talking about the original Venmo transactions, everyone had it in their head. I don't even remember where it initially came from, that's how Lori was able to, send money back and forth as well. And that just worked. She did it through Tylee's account. Sure. Well, what Annie Cushing shared is that Lori actually had her own account as well on Venmo. So now it's like, why was she using Tylee's to send the money? Is it just Tylee had it open on her phone and it was easy? I don't know.
That came from Colby. Colby actually said that his mom was very technologically challenged. And then the fact this week that Lori had her own other separate Venmo account that had transactions, kind of, she was able to, obviously set up her own account. So that was just an...
And they were open around the same time.
Right, exactly. So,
Well, I logged in because I wanted to see Lori's account a little bit more. And you can't see her friends list unless you're logged in. So if you have a Venmo account, you can take a peek. And I noticed that Annie went through her friends list and said, oh, yeah, and she's friends with Zulema. And she sure is. Now, Zulema's account, I'm on Zulema's now. And it looks like people pay for their sessions this way with her. But it doesn't look like anything's happened since September on her Venmo.
No, that's really interesting. So we have the Venmo accounts, Lori having her own Venmo account, and then what is the last piece from this week, the last update? Oh, my favorite photo of Lori of all time. Ian, have you seen this photo of Lori?
Is this the one where her face looks kind of sunken?
I'll do that to you.
Yeah, to put it lightly, she is looking a bit rough. And I hate speculating, but I'm so sorry for someone who took such pride in their appearance and the makeup and the smugness of her court appearance with that bright lipstick. Her Telemate or Telemate account, Telemate account, where people from the media, family, friends, whoever can contact you. And so Lori's profile has a photo of her profile picture, and it's almost
not a good angle.
It looks like she could be related to Voldemort. So
speaking of Harry Potter, yeah, but it looks like too, from what Justin had mentioned, is she accepted his request to be a contact, but then he tried to call her and she rejected his call. I do appreciate that she's still wearing her lipstick.
Yes.
In her photo. And it looks like too, I was just going through kind of the comments, because if you look at the photo that Justin Lem posted, it says estimated cost for the call was $450. And someone mentioned, well, maybe she couldn't afford the $450. He's like, oh no, I paid money into her account.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know if she recognized who he was and was like, oh no, but thought that was interesting.
Oh no. All right. So does that pretty much sum up the updates? Nothing big this week, but
it's just uncovered information again. I'm sure there'll be more as things progress.
There is speculation again with the coronavirus and everything hitting this week. So Chad Daybell was trying to get permits for bringing a manufactured home onto his lot in Rexburg. And so there is speculation out there that has doubled down this week that because of coronavirus, some U.S. prisons are considering letting the non-violent offenders out on home parole. So speculation if Lori is about to potentially get out of jail on home arrest, and Chad's children, because they primarily live in the home if they don't want her there. So he's trying to bring in a secondary home for the property. So that...
he has a big enough property.
Yeah. So that's pretty much the only other notable, I guess, kind of thought this week. But let's get into peppering Ian with the questions that we have for him.
Let's play 20 questions again.
Let's play 20 questions. Now, so Ian, last week, especially regarding the document that Ian Pulowski allegedly wrote, the outline of Lori and Chad's beliefs. Now, my understanding in terms of expressions of Mormonism, right, is that individuals cannot self-proclaim to be prophets. Is that correct?
In essence, yes. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints believes that we have a living prophet, and he and his counselors and the 12 apostles that lead the church, they are what we call prophets, seers, and revelators, and that they're the only ones that, that we have one living prophet, and that's it. Now, where I'll call into question here is, what do we mean by prophet? And different people might use that in different ways. So one of the things that I'll put out there that we do believe in is that through the Holy Spirit we can receive revelation, but that revelation is for ourselves or our family or for people we have a specific responsibility for. Mm-hmm. So, for example, a bishop who's the head of their local congregation or ward, they might receive revelation for members of their ward, especially pertaining to responsibilities within the church and the things that they do. Or a stake president who is the leader of a number of regional congregations, they could receive revelation for the things that go on within multiple wards then. People can receive revelations for their individual families. Mm-hmm. But if you have no direct relationship to someone, either through family or you're not responsible for their pastoral care within a congregation, then you wouldn't receive revelation for them.
Gotcha. So someone is standing up, like a particular expression and saying, I am a prophet, I'm receiving revelation, and these particular teachings that I'm receiving are different than what my local ward is teaching. That, I assume, is not really smiled upon in the church. If someone claims that they are receiving their own revelations and that the teachings differ greatly from that of the LDS Church.
Correct.
Now, is that grounds for, can you explain, this is something that a lot of people have actually asked about. Can you explain briefly, I'm sure it's a layered topic, the grounds for excommunication?
This isn't something that I have personal experience of or a lot of direct experience in, so it's a difficult one for me to answer in great detail. Excommunication is not something that the LDS Church takes lightly, and it's not something that's typically a quick or easy process. The two primary things that tend to come up are breaking the law of chastity and what's considered to be sexual sin. The other can be what we might term apostate beliefs. That is, people believing things or especially teaching things that are contrary to the doctrine of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, this is a slow process because the church would rather keep people than excommunicate people. And so the leadership typically look for opportunities for people to show that they want to stay within the church and move in a different direction. So it can be a fairly lengthy process for somebody to be excommunicated, but I'm sure if the leadership of the church feels that there's an urgency to address, I'm sure that it can move much faster.
There's been a lot of speculation in the Christmas Misery group, especially from members not of the LDS Church, right? I think a lot of people who don't understand the church, they see, okay, Rexburg is predominantly Mormon, therefore every single actor in this case, whether it's prosecutor, defense, judge, law enforcement, so on and so forth, all will have a pro-Lori Vallow bias. And I see a lot of people saying that. And I personally find it a little bit ridiculous, but are you able to speak to that in your experience with, say, small, predominantly Mormon towns and how that would affect a legal case, if at all?
Yes. The first thing, and I should have reiterated that at the start of the broadcast, I'm not here as a spokesperson for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I can only really speak for myself. So I can't comment on how the church itself currently views Lori or Chad, but I do, talk with a lot of members. I know a lot of members, as you'd expect. A lot of the time, members are concerned about the image of the church, are concerned about how we're depicted, what kind of press we get, because a lot of it is critical, generally. And I think that instead of seeing sympathy, the more that comes out, the more there's a sense of embarrassment, really, that, Chad and Lori are not just bringing a bad press to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but more, we don't want to be associated with people who are behaving like this, and we don't want our religion and our faith associated with it. One of the interesting things with this I think there was a potential for Chad to play a kind of misogynistic, I'm a good man who's been led astray by a bad woman card, almost a kind of film noir scenario. But the more that comes out, the harder it is for Chad to be able to do that. And I think that what little sympathy there was, a lot has leaked away since we saw the footage from the storage unit of Chad being quite familiar with Laurie while he was still married to Tammy.
His first wife, he was handsy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and she seemed quite comfortable with it as well. Mm-hmm. I think if people could present themselves a realistic scenario of, well, who knows when the relationship really started, and who knows, and if they'd been faithfully married to previous spouses, then, let's not judge, kind of thing. And then you see that kind of footage, and it just makes obvious that things were going on before Chad's first wife died, makes it a lot harder to be sympathetic towards them, and a lot harder to defend them anyway. So I think there wasn't a ton of support there. There were a lot of big questions, the same kind of questions that everybody else has about this case. Where are the children? Mm-hmm. Why won't they produce the children? Have been the same questions that people who know about the case inside the church have had. There's no way that doesn't look bad.
Right.
We don't know what happened and who's guilty or innocent of what, but there's no way that doesn't look bad. And what little sympathy there may have been, I think, has just been steadily ebbing away. So I don't think there's any chance of her getting favoritism, because her conduct and Chad's conduct is just so far removed from the standards that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints teaches are important.
The reason that we asked that particular question is that so many people just automatically believe that because the town is predominantly Mormon, that Laurie's getting a free pass. I mean, people honestly make it out to be like members of the Mormon Church are going to pull like a Tom Cruise and, use a carabiner and drop down through the jail ceiling and get her out. Not true.
Not even that too, but a lot of the people, at least some of the people that we spoke with, had even mentioned that there is speculations around their city that some of the higher ups, whether it be police or judges or whatever, are also part of the cult. So that's kind of a rumor going around too.
Now, with regards to Chad's relationship with his children, I've tried thinking about this from the perspective of, if you were Chad, what would be the conversation that you had with your children? And I suspect it would be along the lines of, you were going to hear some terrible things said in the media and people gossiping, and maybe even people at the grocery store. You're going to hear some awful things, and they're not true. I want you to ignore the lies. You know who I am as your father. Don't read the newspapers. Don't watch the news. Don't let the lies disturb you. Don't even expose yourself to it. And when you want to believe that someone is innocent, you can believe almost any lie that's told to you. And I'm sure that these children loved their parents and loved Chad and want to believe that he's innocent. And then when we come to that video from the storage unit, I think absolutely that's why it's the wrench in the works and why there are these reports for changed relationship, because that's not people talking. That's not people gossiping. It's not some scandalous thing posted in a newspaper. That's a tangible piece of video showing some kind of intimacy between them that you would not expect from a supposedly happily married man. And so it does not surprise me at all that that is the piece of evidence that causes things to change in that relationship. We're no longer talking about, ignore what so-and-so says at the grocery store or what so-and-so says over the counter. We're not talking about some little piece of gossipy speculation in a ward or in a newsletter or a newspaper. We're talking about clear documented video evidence. And if they've seen that, and we have no idea what of all of the wide-ranging catalogue of evidence Chad's family have seen and what they know.
Sure.
And we have no idea what Chad's explanation for any of it is, or Laurie's, or what defense they'll use. But then you read that video footage, and it seems, at the very least, undeniable that Chad and Laurie's relationship, while Chad's first wife, Tammy, was still alive, was way more intimate than it should have been. I think, that's the moment that things would start to change, because you can't refute that. And I would not be surprised if the application to have that home on his land is for Chad to stay in.
Kind of segueing into something else that you touched on last week, Ian, you mentioned the name Christopher Perrett last week, which everyone knows. He is now the, I guess, is it just leader of Vallow? So, Amanda, do you want to kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so remember, Vallow is another voice of warning. If you want to check it out, it's Vallow, or LDS Vallow, on Facebook, and they also have a website. Same thing, LDS Vallow. Now, Ian, what do you know about Vallow? Do you have any other information about them?
Not really. I wasn't aware of Vallow before this case came up, but there are many groups that see opportunities to inform and sell products to people who are Mormons, and see opportunities there to, I'm not saying it's necessarily their goal is to make money, but, the end result can be to provide goods and services to people who are looking for ways to be better prepared for the difficult times that we see are ahead, heading towards the second coming, as we talked about last week. But also, most people in their lives go through good and bad times. Well, we all do, actually. And how can our families be best set up to endure those times and survive and come through them? And so there are plenty of groups who are out there, looking for ways to help educate people, help them understand what resources are out there, sell them products, sell them trainings, all of those kind of things. So I don't know much about Vallow specifically, but they seem to fall under that general umbrella of preparedness. And, Mormons are a kind of captive open market for them in that way.
Yeah, and I see, too, they have a whole area. I mean, you can pay to be on this website. I'm not going to, but they do have some free resources on here as well. It looks like some manuals and one about tent cities even. So that all of this just seems odd. I just didn't know if you had read anything about them since, or knew anyone that was kind of part of it. So still interesting that, everything on their website. I don't know if you've had a chance to even look at it at all.
I'm not aware of knowing anyone who's connected to it, or been to their meetings. I've asked around a little, and nothing's substantial has come back on that. So I apologize. I wish I had more information for you.
Now, a vow is more prepping centric, right? Or is that preparing a people? I know that I believe I read something in an article that a vow was a forum basically built behind a paywall, so you have to pay to subscribe.
Yes.
And it allows people who don't necessarily have streamlined LDS beliefs, maybe something more along the lines of like doomsday prophecies, people who have revelations, anything that would, I guess, be considered fringe or more something that you would find in an expression. Is that true? Do you know that's kind of the purpose? That was the purpose of Vallow being founded.
I don't know that for a fact, but so the LDS Church organizes a lot of preparedness information resources to start with. And it's not unusual for local congregations to organize preparedness classes and events and, resources with that in mind. So anytime that you have an outside organization taking on that kind of role, it's not surprising that they're not just trying to reach people who are active members of the LDS Church, but they're trying to open that up and appeal to a broader audience. because so much is already taken care of and catered for by the LDS Church itself.
Thank you for that information, Ian. And kind of, I don't want to speculate too much, but we do want kind of your thoughts on something that's floating around. There has been some speculation that Tylee might have been married off to someone in another expression. What are your thoughts on that rumor?
This was a concern of mine, and I really thought that this was quite possible, largely because of a case from 2017-2018 regarding an expression called the Knights of the Crystal Blade. I don't think you've talked about this before, am I right?
Correct. We were actually going to last week. We discussed it before the show, but I think time got the better of us last week. So do you mind giving everyone like a little story time on that?
Sure. This is a really disturbing case, and it does bear some terrible parallels with this one. So the Knights of the Crystal Blade, the leader of that expression was Samuel Schaefer, also known as Samuel the Seer, and also his best friend, John Coltharp. Now, back in December 2017, Coltharp's ex-wife, she called the police, claiming that her ex-husband had kidnapped their 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, and called them in to find them. So the children were missing. Nobody knew where they were. The police found them in a derelict compound in a remote part of southwest Utah, outside a small town, and found them hidden inside 50-gallon water drums. Now, this part of Utah, and in December it was sub-zero temperatures at night. Coltharp had left their 4 children with his parents in a double-wide trailer, and the 2 sons and his parents who were living there were found immediately, and then the 2 girls were found in these barrels, and the other 2 girls who were missing, also daughters of Schaefer and Coltharp, were found in another trailer several miles away. This all sounds ghastly enough already. It gets worse. It's one of those things that are almost unimaginable. Schaefer and Coltharp had married each other's youngest daughters. So these daughters are 4 and 5 years old, and they had married each other's daughters and, for want of a better expression, consummated those marriages. So,
oh my gosh,
terrible abuse had taken place. A third man enters the picture in that Schaefer had promised his 5-year-old daughter as a child bride to Robert Shaw Rowe. And there was a separate case that proceeded there. So as they seem to have been actively recruiting for their group, and child marriage, or as I would prefer to call it, child abuse, was a prominent feature of this expression, which is just awful thoughts. And I completely understand when you hear all of that, when you hear about missing children, when you hear about a parent refusing to produce the children, refusing to say where they are, when we hear of the details of this Mormon expression that Chad and Laurie belong to, yeah, my mind went back to this horrible, horrible case. And it did concern me that could be what had happened to Tylee. I no longer think that's the case, but we do not know. We come back to, where are the children, Laurie? We do not know what has happened. It's certainly not impossible, and that is a horrifying thought.
That's absolutely horrifying. I did a little bit of reading on Knights of the Crystal Blade, and there were 6 total children involved, and it's just so incredibly sad. I believe that there were how many? 4 girls and 2 boys involved, and they were all taken by authorities, and it's just such an incredibly sad case. But in doing research and going through expressions, right? And I believe in one of our previous episodes we talked about, because Amanda, when you were in Rexburg, people told you about another expression living. Was it in Montana?
Yeah, the water one, right? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, the water one.
Yeah,
Ian, I think I ran this by you. There's another expression based out of Montana, and they apparently have access to a spring, like spring water there, that they believe is sacred. And so they bottle it up and take it to Utah, Idaho, really anywhere with an LDS temple, and then they'll pour the water on the temple steps. And Amanda can give more details on that. Have you heard of any sort of expressions like in branching out to other states?
Definitely other states, yes. I mean, wherever you have states that have a significant population of Mormons, you will find some of these expressions, and especially in more remote areas and more remote states. So that's part of why you see a number of expressions in Idaho where large parts of the state are rural, and that's bordering onto Montana, which is also bordering down into, the northeast part of Utah. We see that running down, southern Utah and therefore Nevada and Arizona. You do see expressions in all of those places. I'm not familiar with this particular expression and their particular practices, but there are a number of expressions in Montana.
Apparently, one particular town in Montana has a lot of teenage girls, and people have speculated, not the water one that we were just speaking of, but another one has, apparently, it's rumored that girls are sent there to be married. And so, I mean, obviously, pure speculation. I don't want to start any rumors here. Again, disclaimer, but when Lori, Alex, Tylee, and JJ went up north to Yellowstone, they weren't terribly far, from Montana. They easily could have slipped over there. But apparently there's one expression. It is an actual violent group that has bunkers and the whole bit. But it's very much rumored that they take girls from other groups and marry within, if that makes sense. So
that's horrible.
It's incredibly sad how many... And I've been watching another show on television too, but I've done a little bit of research on it, and just how many people think that it's so small, and then one particular group in, I believe, Utah has over 6,000 people in it.
And kind of going back to what you had asked me, so what I got was someone shared with me, it looks like text messages or, just messages on some sort of app possibly, but they talk about how a vow is kind of an umbrella of a couple different expressions possibly. And then from there's a group that they believe is called the Flowing Waters. And that's the one that takes the water. And then supposedly there's a prayer. They put the water at certain temple grounds and then say they pour it out, and then that will bring forth the last days if they do this ritual of some kind.
That's so bizarre.
So I don't know about that. Ian, have you ever heard of anything like that?
I haven't, no. Every Mormon expression by its nature has some unorthodox beliefs and some peculiar things. And as we talked about last week, every religion from an outside perspective can seem peculiar and seem strange. And while I don't understand that particular ritual they're performing, is it really, from an outside perspective, any more strange than some of the rituals and some of the ordinances and things that any church does?
That makes perfect sense. And kind of segueing out of that to other things, I just have to bring up my dear friend, and I say that jokingly, Julie Rowe. Now, my question for you is, do you have any insight into circuits, like the author circuits, like preparing a people? I'm trying to mentally come up with a picture of how it works. I've seen the flyers that Chad put out, right? We've watched clips from their podcast that they had where it was him, Julie, at one point, I believe, Melanie Gibb and Lori guested on them. How did those things work, like preparing a people? So their entire spiel is supposedly preparing people for the end of times, right? So they have prepping classes, they talk about weaponry, the tents, and it seems like almost they put out flyers and they have, 4 or 5 authors or people who are well known in the LDS kind of literary community, and they have a big tent, and then they invite a bunch of people to it, and they just talk and give their little speeches. Have you ever been to one of these, or do you know how they work? Any insight?
I haven't been to any of these things. It doesn't sound wildly dissimilar to, a general book festival, right? It's just that the subject context is a little different. I do know you see 2 different types of activities. One is where a singular author might do events, with readings or lead a discussion on preparedness and have, copies of their book available to sell and that they'd sign and so forth. Some of those might take place in a LDS Church building or might take place outside. If they're selling things or wanting to sell things, that typically wouldn't happen within a LDS Church building. Those, my understanding is, tend to be smaller affairs and smaller numbers of people, but that's a good way that a writer can build up their contacts list and, build up their supporter base and steadily grow their writerly business. And then, yes, secondly, you have those kind of mini conferences where you can have a number of writers appear and talk about their books and do presentations and so forth. I haven't been to any of these. I think a lot of them happen in more remote areas. But, now that I've said that out loud, I'm probably going to be proven wrong about that. And it may just be an aspect of LDS culture that I'm just somehow oblivious to.
I was trying to kind of determine if it's more, because again, I'm completely ignorant to the Mormon faith. If it was more along the lines of a book club, type of thing, a book fair with the authors coming to talk about their books and huck them, or if it was more like a big tent revival type of atmosphere, minus the crazy dancing and singing, of course.
From what I understand, and this is admittedly limited knowledge, but from what I understand, it's more of a book festival type affair, and as well as the writers who'd have their, stalls with their books, you'd have, representation from small companies that sell preparedness products of a wide variety. That can even include home storage systems for how to more efficiently organize and rotate canned goods and things like that. So there's a wide variety of things that fall under that preparedness umbrella. And my understanding is that it's kind of fairs with that in mind. And the book authors can be your kind of star attraction to help encourage people to come out. And gosh, it almost sounds like on a different scale, like Comic-Con, right? Where you've got your famous comic book writers and artists who are there, and in that convention hall, but you've also got a number of rows of people selling action figures and selling comic books and selling posters and selling jewelry, anything that has even a tangential relationship to any aspect of Comic-Con.
No, you're absolutely correct, and that's exactly what it sounds like. And the flyers for it are very interesting, and I found it absolutely hilarious when preparing a people, when the history of their flyers and the fairs that they've had is all over the internet. And they came out and they said that they have no idea who Chad Daybell is. They've never spoken with him. And that it's possible that Chad, drove by one of their meetings, events, but that they had no idea who he was. And I'm like, well, guys, the internet does exist. So,
well, I've gone through a little bit of a Vallow site, I should say Facebook, and it made me too mad. I can't even look at it.
It's very hateful. It is very, very, very hateful.
It's only hate, and it's disgusting.
Everything is anti-gay, anti-liberal, it's terrible. It's tasteless.
That's a perfect word for it. This entire Facebook page is tasteless. There is one person that I do commend that is taking I don't know if it was an email or what it was, where Christopher said, the kids are fine. Everything will come to light after the media circus or something is, I'm trying to find it again, after the media circus is done. Mm-hmm. And someone just takes that email and posts it on a lot of their posts. So that's hilarious to me.
The troll, I guess.
Exactly. Well, they do have their little manuals though on their website, and that seems more legitimate, but their Facebook page just is nonsense.
Ian, would you feel comfortable telling us what you think has happened in this case, how you see it all fitting together?
Sure. I'll do my best. And obviously this is all speculative. And obviously we all hope that somehow, in some way, somewhere, Tylee and JJ are alive and well and doing fine. The longer it goes on, the less realistic that is. But, that hope is always there. I did think for a time, as I mentioned, about the Knights of the Crystal Blade, and that something similar could have happened there. It also crossed my mind if this was some kind of PR circus and Chad and Laurie had hauled the kids away to, get all the attention. That's just less and less likely the longer all of this goes on. My fear is, based on the manifesto found on Ian's computer, that was just chilling when it came to talking about the zombies and the idea that Tylee and JJ had been identified as these zombies whose spirits can't progress from this mortal life and can't return to their bodies. He talks about the only way to move forward is to await the death of their bodies, which is that conjures such horrible thoughts. And if that manifesto is true, and we don't know that manifesto is an accurate reflection or representation of Chalori's beliefs, but if it is, did they kill Tylee and JJ believing that there were zombies and believing that they were helping them? Maybe. I remember Chad said that the children were fine. He didn't say that they were alive. And if he believes in those beliefs about them being zombies, he may believe that the kids are fine because in killing them, their spirits have been able to move on to their next mortal probation after their zombie bodies were killed. I mean, it's a ghastly thought. I really hope that they are alive somewhere, that they're fine and well. That's my current working theory for what seems most likely to have happened, which is just appalling.
What about you, Robin? Where are you at now?
I'm pretty much exactly where Ian is at. I think that statistically speaking, when you're looking at, active cases, obviously every hour that passes with a missing persons, whether it's man, woman, or child, the probability of that person being found becomes bleaker and bleaker. When you put that against the alleged document by Ian Pawlowski and the explanation as Ian explained about zombies and how that works, I'm sad to say I don't believe that either child is still with us. I don't believe that either one of them is alive. Where they were killed, I am unsure. I know that the FBI and a lot of people are speculating that it's likely Yellowstone. But I've read some theories that it may be Arizona. And
I've been hearing a lot about that lately.
I've been hearing a lot about Arizona lately. So I'm actually thinking that may be a more likely scenario. But yeah, I don't know. I think that there are so many players in this case. I want to know how Zulema fits into it. So I'm anxiously awaiting Alex's toxicology and autopsy results. I think that we're going to possibly see charges against Chad here probably in the next bit. Hopefully Laurie, it seems like the law enforcement in Chandler is working on that actively. And, with the coronavirus coming and court dates being put back, Lori possibly even being released on home parole or house arrest, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with this case, but at the end of it, I believe where I'm not getting it is I don't know the reasoning behind it. Did Lori just want a fresh start and want the popularity and air of becoming, a wife to a supposedly well-known Mormon author? Did she believe everything? Did she actually fully believe that her 2 children were zombies? It seems like there was a lot of planning involved in this case with slowly getting rid of the dogs, not re-upping the medication. There was a lot of premeditation in this case, I believe. And I believe that's actually, been shown.
But the service dog thing is the first big sign that she was going to do something bad, because especially if that kid was benefiting from having that dog around and doing well with it, there's zero reason to get rid of it. It could have flown just fine. It could be in a car just fine. It is super trained to help that child. So even though they were moving cross country, that dog would have been just fine moving. And then remember too, Melanie's quote, I have it from CBS 15 right now. I guess Ian had said, his wife had said, sometimes children are full of light and then they just go dark. So that with the zombies. The only thing I don't know is, I've been seeing a lot of the Arizona talk, but I feel like they would have found the plane tickets, or if they drove them, I guess. I just don't know where Alex was during that time, I guess, from them disappearing at different times. The timeline just is strange.
The timeline is very strange. And one of the things that's easy to lose track of is the difference in the dates between the last known sightings of Tylee and JJ.
Right.
That JJ is sighted at school a number of weeks after Tylee's last sighting. And that makes me think that if the children are dead, that they did not die at the same time. And that Tylee died significantly before. And I believe that it's after Tylee's last sighting that the service dog is got rid of. And we have the question about JJ's medication, the prescription not being refilled and the bottle found being half empty. And it crosses my mind that Tylee out the picture. We know that Tylee has been this responsible acting person who was probably a mother figure for JJ. With her gone, now Lori has to try and deal with JJ without that help and support, removing JJ's crutches, his support system here. Tylee gone, the service dog gone, his medication gone. Was she setting him up, and this is purely speculative, but setting him up that he would be acting out in more and more uncontrolled ways and fitting in with this kind of zombie belief? Was she setting him up to fail in the hope that that would lead to her being able to manipulate and encourage Chad or Alex to kill JJ?
I feel like this is going to hit like a hurricane when things and autopsies and medical examiner and results from the medical examiner's office comes out. This is going to hit like an absolute hurricane. It's just so incredibly sad. And, I've never really been interested in a case of this sort. I remember I was fairly young when the Elizabeth Smart case happened. And Ian, you and I have discussed the Elizabeth Smart case a bit as well. I was a little young, so I wasn't fully comprehending the gravity of that situation and everything that happened and how deep it actually went and all the different religious ties and everything. But this one is it's just insane. It's just absolutely crazy, and it's so horrendously sad.
Yeah, and how many, convictions are going to come of this? Are they going to go after Chad next? And then also, what about Christopher? I mean, he's the one that put out that, it looks like that on a message board or something for a vow, that they're fine. Is he going to get in trouble for kind of vouching for people that possibly, killed children?
In that vein as well, we have Julie Rowe, who said that the angels had told her the children were fine. We also have, what was Jason Mao's involvement in all of this? How did he connect to it? what introductions he made and what degree of involvement. We don't know how far-reaching this Church of the Firstborn is. Don't know how small an organization it is, or even if it genuinely exists. We come back to, we don't know the veracity of that manifesto document. But the biggest piece for me is we have not heard from Chad and Laurie. We have not heard their perspective, their defense. We have no idea what they are going to say when any case eventually goes to court. And I mention this not because I believe that they're innocent, but because whatever account they come up with and bring forward is something that can be checked and something that will surely shed light on what actually happened and help give a greater understanding of this whole case.
I'm going to immediately segue into a topic that we discussed last week. So in the introduction of our show last week, Amanda and I discussed a particular piece of the case, being Alex's sexuality. And last week in multiple of the groups, a video surfaced, a YouTube video of Alex performing stand-up comedy. And if you recall, Alex comes out onto the stage and says, well, something to the effect of, wow, you all look so good tonight. It makes me wish that I were straight. So there has been a great deal of speculation on that particular comment relating to Alex's relationship with Laurie. The fight that they had in the street where Laurie allegedly screamed that he was bringing disgrace upon the family. So when we aired this last show, if you are aware, we put the show out on all streaming platforms as well as YouTube. So on YouTube last week, we did receive a comment from a listener who said that she was with us up until I made the statement saying that homophobia is not welcome on our show, and if you are homophobic, then we do not want you listening to our show. A bunch of people came out and commented on that YouTube thread and responded to her. I would just like to address that again and actually double down on my position. Again, we explore every aspect of every case, and I think I can speak for pretty much everyone here, at least Amanda and myself. Ian, I absolutely want to give you the microphone on the floor, but I think that I can say that we are a podcast about love, tolerance, acceptance, and we do not tolerate bigotry or hatred of any kind. So if this is a particular issue, if you're racist, bigoted, xenophobic, just know before you get into our podcast that you're not going to like what you hear. We're all about love and acceptance here. So that being said, if you don't like that, this is not the show for you. In regards to that, Ian, I would like to turn it over to you because I know this is kind of a multi-layered issue for you in multiple ways as far as with the case, Alex, and your own self, and then things that maybe you have gone through with the church as well. So I would just like to give you the microphone.
That comment was so interesting in so many ways, and I summarized it as someone saying, I'm not prejudiced. I just hate people being gay so much. I must tell you about it.
That's exactly what it said.
And
it's really
a scenario of if somebody wanted to convert people away from homosexuality or so forth, to do it in such a hateful way is counterproductive because it just poisons the well so much. You would never want to drink that water. And so it speaks to me more of an insecurity of faith and a need to get others to try and validate it than something that's, really coming from a sincere place and a place of love. And the gospel should always be about love. So it was a really sad and quite petty comment. As for Alex, obviously none of us know what his private thoughts were and what his sexuality really was, and there's so little evidence. The piece with the stand-up comedy, there are so many stand-up comedians who make jokes about being gay. Is it possible that it was, from his heart and talking about him? Sure. But to me, almost as easily could be just what he thinks is a joke that's going to get an easy laugh. And sometimes straight stand-up comedians who make those jokes about being gay, it can be borderline offensive sometimes. My concern more with the case, and I don't care whether Alex was gay or not, but there are a number of accusations without any substantial evidence in this case, claiming that one guy or another was gay in some way, and it's used to play into societal homophobia and make I look bad. You know, there aren't any suggestions in this case that so-and-so might be gay that are done in such a way that just, oh, that's an interesting piece of information or an interesting aspect of their life. It's always been used in a way to make them look like a bad person. And I really resent that kind of casual homophobia. It's a pretty low approach to take. And we see that, for example, in Melanie's allegations against her ex-husband with the custody.
Yes. Accusing him of having affairs with other men, which is, according to Brandon, unsubstantiated and false, but it is still used as a tactic, like Ian said, for casual homophobia.
And she puts the accusation out there without presenting any substantial evidence or anything to support it. And it's just another way of trying to say, wow, and he was such a bad guy. And I resent making that association.
I completely agree. I definitely wanted to address that particular comment. I know that people are not always going to see eye to eye, and that's absolutely fine. Your beliefs are your beliefs, our beliefs are our beliefs, but I just want everyone to know that this podcast is very open and accepting and diverse, and we will not accept comments that go against that. So I just want to put a hard line in the sand right there. Now, Ian, do you mind discussing and giving us a little bit of an overview on what the church's stance on homosexuality is?
That's a fair question to ask. Thank you for asking that, Robin. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the doctrine is pretty cut and dry, that people shouldn't have sexual relationships outside of marriage, and they define marriage as being between one man and one woman. So therefore, things like homosexuality, viewed as a sin if it's acted upon and is, outside of things that are considered to be in good standing with the church, and can be grounds for excommunication. Where I will say that there is a bit of nuance, for want of a much better word, is that the teachings of the church is also that everybody is welcome at church and everybody needs to be made welcome. And that creates an obvious tension between wanting to invite everyone, wanting to include everyone, and sometimes people will be living lives that are not perfectly in accordance with the gospel as it's taught at the LDS Church. But the truth of the matter is that we believe that everybody is imperfect, that nobody is perfectly living up to gospel standards, and we believe that's why the atonement of Christ is necessary. So I think that's the first thing as members that we need to have in our minds, that before we are judging other people, that we remember that none of us are any better or any worse from a gospel perspective, and we all have the same need. I think beyond that, there is a diversity of opinions within the membership of the church of how these things should be handled, and the complicated situations that people have, and that I think that the overwhelming majority of people just want to be happy. People don't want to be miserable and have unhappy lives, and we're all trying different things to figure out what makes us happy, and we need a space to be able to do that without judgment, without condemnation. People need supporting and nurturing and strengthening, and this is similar to what we talked about with the YouTube comment, that if people poison the well by just being hateful, why would anyone want to go and drink of that water?
Exactly.
So I wanted to mention a couple of things that some members of the LDS Church have to be a different perspective on things. One is a movement that started in 2013 called Mormons Building Bridges. And this was founded by a nucleus of people active members of the church who wanted to build bridges with the LGBT community. who wanted to show that there was love for them, that there was respect for them, and that they could be embraced. I don't want to use the word acceptance because I don't think anyone wants to be just accepted. That feels really kind of limited, but more, embraced for who we are in whatever space that we are. And the parallel I draw with this is that as a Mormon, I want to be accepted in that space too, in the same way, therefore, that I should be accepting of other people in the space that they are, as long as we're not actively trying to hurt other people and not actively hating on other people. Mormons Building Bridges then marched at the Utah Pride that year in Salt Lake City.
Wow.
And I think about 400 people. And we turned up in our Sunday best, the typical Mormon Sunday dress, that is. Most of the people with the group, the men, wore a white shirt and a tie. And the women who were with the group, typically wore dresses, but nice Sunday best clothing. And we sang hymns as we marched. And we were there to show support for the community and to make a public statement that we love everyone and include everyone and embrace people. And that was very well received for the most part by people at Pride. And we had no idea how we would be accepted. No idea what the response would be. When you're coming from an organization that's not known for being friendly to the LGBT community, it is a bit something to turn up, right? And march at their event. Of course, to participate in a parade, it requires approval in advance, so it's not like it was a surprise that it was happening. But there was some trepidation, and everyone I spoke with from our group marching were equally just overwhelmed by the love that we felt in return, that people were happy to see us there. And I think they understood as well that because it was the first time, people were taking a risk in terms of their standing in the church. We had no idea what the reaction would be. But for the most part, I think that was fine, but we didn't know that. I don't think it's a coincidence that it's within a year of that there was the court ruling that temporarily legalized marriage equality in Utah. The Supreme Court refused to hear that case, which was Kitchen versus Herbert, after Judge Shelby had ruled that there should be marriage equality. And until that was... there was a temporary stay. So there was a short period where same-sex couples could get married. And then there was a stay waiting for it. The Supreme Court, as I said, refused to hear it. It made Utah one of the first states in the union to have marriage equality. Mm-hmm. I don't know that would have necessarily happened or happened so fast without things like Mormons Building Bridges. I don't want to give too much credit for that either, because I do believe that marriage equality is something that is a constitutional right and stands within the Constitution. So it should have come about regardless. Mm-hmm. But I do think it was helpful to have groups from fairly conservative organizations out there advocating a message of love and embracing all people. Marriage equality proved to be more controversial than the Mormons Building Bridges group, and I was a vocal advocate of marriage equality. And one of the ways that I helped explain it to more conservative members and people who were resistant to that was kind of from a libertarian angle of, we don't want the government telling our church who we can and can't marry and in what circumstances. And for example, when people get married in the temple, that's not open to the public. You need to have a temple recommend to attend and observe that. There are countries such as the UK where a legal wedding has to take place in a public space. So there's that opportunity, the things you see in the movies and TV shows all the time. If anyone here knows of a good reason why this couple should not be married, that chance for people to object. We don't want the law coming in and saying, no, you can't marry people in the way you see fit. And so in return, we should be saying the same for other people. And if other churches want to marry other types of couples that perhaps our church wouldn't, or if civilly that want to be done, then that should be allowed, because that's part of non-government interference. And why should government in the business of marriage and so forth? So that was one way that I used to help people understand where I was coming from. Being a loud advocate of that did cause some problems, and there were some people in our local congregation who took a very hard line on it and tried to make life very difficult for us, and they doxed us. You know, they put our information online and encouraged people to contact us to let us know just what awful people we were and of the terrible liberal agenda that we were pursuing. And one of those people was one of my wife's best friends, and unfortunately led to the end of that friendship.
That's devastating. Now, are you able to describe any particular repercussions for people who perhaps did go to the March, for Equality or speak out in favor of gay marriage and gay rights issues? Are you able to discuss how the church reacts to that as a whole, if at all?
I'm not aware of individuals who had specific problems with the church as an organization. I'm not saying there weren't any. But I can't think of any off the top of my head. But sometimes individual members created difficulties, and that's what we ran into. And that hits close to home. In some ways, that can be just as hard and as difficult. But we were quite firm in our belief of what was right and how people should be treated. That they have hate in their hearts instead of love, and that's really unfortunate. And I know they didn't see it like that and don't see it like that, and that's their choice. But we believe that when it comes to Judgment Day, we're all going to be accountable for our actions and our decisions and our thoughts and what we did with them. And we stood for love, we stood for equality, and we stood for constitutional rights being the same for everyone, that equality before the law. And I don't think that that's something that I will ever regret.
Allyship is really important, and I really appreciate that. And several other than the incredibly hateful and vile comment that was left on our YouTube, I have met a handful of other Mormons as well who do believe the same that you do. So I would like to again reiterate that there is great diversity in all branches of religions, and I really appreciate you kind of discussing that and your experience with it, and that there are people within the Mormon faith who are speaking out publicly, might I add, and going to marches and making a very public stance.
I must clarify with one thing, Robin, and that's, I don't want to sound like, pity me, people were horrible to us, terrible things happened. It wasn't pleasant. But it's nothing compared to the difficulties of their job because they're gay and they don't have employment rights, or the difficulty parents throw them out of their house because they can't come to terms with a child being LGBT. It's nothing compared to the fear someone may have of walking down a street in an unknown area or feeling hostility from people. So I don't want to come across as feeling victimized in any of this.
No, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. But I would like to state, though, that it does take a certain element of a courageousness.
Thank you. I think it's part of it takes a village, right, to use a cliche.
It's very true, though. And Ian, do you mind also, just to finish up this particular topic, do you mind just describing the impact of marriage equality within the church, also building bridges, the participation in the Pride Rally, just kind of the long-term impact of these things that you've witnessed?
Sure. Thank you, Robin. First, with Mormons building bridges, it's important to state that wasn't a one-off. That happens every year now at Pride. And that span off into numerous other cities as well. So we see that across the country, and in some other countries, you'll see Mormons building bridges groups at Pride. Some of the other activities that Mormons Building Bridges do that are lesser well-known but important include the Family Acceptance Project, which is distributing materials for families who are in the LDS Church who find out that they have someone who identifies as LGBT, to help them process it and what it means and come to terms with it and help people understand it and keep families together. Also, they do a lot of work promoting the Safe and Sound program, which is to find homes for homeless LGBTQIA youth in Utah. And so there are a number of projects like that that they participate in and promote and get information out there as well, which I think has really helped the basic understanding, the fact that, and this just sounds so trite to have to say it out loud, but LGBT people are people too. A lot of the time, what I found when I moved to the US 10 years ago was that there were many conservative LDS families who'd never met a gay person, who'd never met a trans man or a trans woman, who'd never knowingly met. And so the idea that they had of what a gay person was, what a lesbian was, what a trans woman is, was kind of removed from the reality of what life is like for most people. And so Mormons Building Bridges, marriage equality, those things, I think, have made it a little more comfortable for people who are LGBT in Utah and inside the LDS Church to be open about who they are. One result of that is more Mormons who know someone who is LGBT and have that experience of seeing, actually, they are just the same person. There's an additional component to their life that I didn't know about, but they haven't stopped loving their mother. They haven't stopped treating people the same way they treated them before. They haven't stopped being whatever kind of person they were. There's an additional component that they didn't know about before. We see with the polling for marriage equality that before it became the law in Utah, with the exception of one narrow poll, there was always a clear majority against marriage equality. Since marriage equality passed, that situation has completely reversed. And now every poll for the last several years has shown a clear majority between 10 and 16 percentage points in favor of marriage equality.
Wow.
And I think that change, that there was so much fear around that of this is going to destroy marriage, it's going to undermine families, it's going to undermine our marriage. And I have no idea how two women or two men getting married and enjoying the same rights and responsibilities under law undermines anybody else's marriage, but this was part of the fears. Once it becomes the law of the land, I think people look around and say, nothing really has changed for us. It hasn't made a direct difference to us. Yeah, what was all the fuss about? Mm-hmm. And there are a number of changes that we've seen in civil rights and equality that's exactly what happens, that people turn around afterwards and say, maybe it wasn't the thin end of the edge. Maybe we were more worried than we needed to be. Utah can still be a very difficult place for people who are LGBT. I'm not trying to say that it's a bed of roses. There is, ingrained prejudices within the community and within churches, within congregations. It can be complicated and difficult.
Sure.
But I do think that overall, there has been significant change for the better in the way the Utah population and members of the LDS Church treat people who are LGBT. And even from the leaders, when we have the general conference meetings twice a year, there was a time when church leaders would say things like, if you have a child who tells you they're gay, maybe they shouldn't live in your house. I'm not quoting them verbatim. Now, the opposite is true, that counsel is said from the pulpit, from leaders of the church, do not throw someone out of your home just because they're gay, just because they're LGBT. That's a significant change because you have that situation where people felt that tacit approval from leadership to say, yeah, we're not comfortable with what our child has told us. We're not comfortable grappling with these issues and dealing with it. They can go live somewhere else. They felt an approval to do that. And now the reverse is true. The pressure is on to how can you come to an understanding? How as a family can you work this out that everybody can feel okay? That you as parents, as siblings, have a responsibility for everybody in your family to feel a connection, to feel loved and to feel welcome. That's a significant challenge thrown down, given the overall thrust of history there.
Yes.
A significant direction that's a very positive thing.
So that's the end of part 2. And we would like to sincerely thank Ian for his time and efforts and for educating us. We learned a lot and it has been tremendously fascinating. So thank you again for listening. Please check out our Patreon. Wash your hands. Stay home. Flatten the curve. And we will see you later this week with the East Area Rapist. Until next crime.